Hey everybody, Lawrence here with Third Basic Terrain coming at you with another one. Okay, so recently I've been playing in a campaign. It's a horror campaign, kind of a Ravenloft mixed match, but DM's definitely running a really good campaign. But anyway, there's been a bit of like elements of time warping and whatnot. It's like we'll see one time we'll see a building that's in perfect condition, and then we'll see the building again. It's like complete ruins. Well, he's doing a masterful job at doing this, and it's hard for me to explain, but we're seeing different elements of time being used in this campaign. Well, I got to thinking, the classic piece of scatter for a town area, wells. Lots of people have done them, whatever, okay. But I got to thinking, it's like, what about its different stages of its existence? Like, when it's still being built, when it's being when it's built and good and looks nice and clean and ready to use, or when it's starting to show its age and get little dings and dents there, or like nobody's used this well in a long time and it's falling apart. So I just thought that'd be something fun to do. But before we get to the actual video, I'd like to give a big shout out to my patrons. Hey, guys, every month, your guys' help is greatly appreciated. I can't thank you enough. It makes doing this, much, much easier. So, all right, guys, let's get to it. I got a couple chunks here that I'm using on my circle jig, and I'm cutting roughly 2¼ inches across circles because, hey, it's a well, it's going to be a circle. But I got a middle piece in there, so I'm kind of eyeballing this part right here about the thickness of the well walls themselves, and just kind of cut out the middle, and boom. I have roughly the shape of the well. I want to do individual layers, so I'm just slicing it down into individual layers for the well. Pretty easy. Of course, I want to stack them up, but Well, I'm going to need some thin layers later on. You'll see why then. So I'm using what's left of these squares, and I'm just slicing off as many thin layers as I possibly can, praying it'll be enough. And actually, it does wind up. So again, just slicing off from the leftover chunks. Of course, I need to round off the edges here, so I'm just using a file. You can use sandpaper or whatever you want to use. I chose to go with the files because these foam rings are a little bit delicate, and I can be pretty gentle if I'm targeted like I am right now, and just round off the edge, file away the edges pretty quickly and pretty easily. Now I got all that done, I just want to start texturing or carving in the bricks using that expensive sculpting tool of a number 2 pencil. It's just quite simple. Go across from where the foam is separate and make a bunch of lines. Of course, I want to glue in the gaps real quick, where it's separate. And just using some PVA, a little spot of glue, and then do that for each and every ring. Quick, simple, easy. No sense in overcomplicate this. It's just the well. Now that I got all the brick lines done and the rings glued together, I'm going to actually start gluing the rings on top of each other, making sure to offset, the brick pattern, so I don't have a continuous line throughout the entire thing, and just quickly get it done. Of course, now the really simple stuff, just slapping on some PVA and then putting the actual wells to the bases. Quick, easy, keeping it simple. Of course, now I actually have to do the little cover cap or whatever you want to call it for the wells. And I'm using some balsa wood because it's soft and simple and easy to cut up. I'm cutting different posts at angles, cutting little angles for the main post that's going to support the whole thing, or kind of, whatever, sort of in a way. And of course, there's the spindle. You got to put the rope on here. I'm just trying to get it cut to, I'm using small dowel rods here. and just cut them the length. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff to do for a simple thing. And of course, right now I'm just using a pin vise to drill some holes into the dowel rods that are cut the length, because you'll see why in a few seconds. I'm using some paper clips that I'm going to jam into those holes, so I actually can put it through the main supports for the caps, just so I can, make sure that it'll actually stay in place. Of course, I'm eyeballing the height there and just figuring out how high I want it to be. Drill a hole through the support beams, and this is actually a simple process. I got the one right, so I don't have to mark it again. Boom, done. I just ran it through. I got the holes drilled. Now let's actually put it together. Just kind of trim the paper clips the length, put a dab of super glue on the support beam there, jam the paper clip through, and boom, it's done quick. Again, as I said, just trying to make it simple and easy. Follow the KISS rules, keep it super simple. Of course, I'm getting ready to cut up more support beams for the roof of the cap or cover. I'm just trying to make it sure they're all the same length, line them up, and mark them real quick, real easy. And I'm just going to use a razor saw quick here and cut them all in half to the length that I want. And honestly, I did not really do a whole lot of planning. It's like, okay, yeah, this length will work. I got these sticks, I'll just cut them in half. And of course, now I just want to come in an angle and go to the angles that I cut into the main support beam and just kind of line them up. It's like, yeah, that works. It does. It really does work. But no, I'm trying to get an idea of how it looks. And just, this is all eyeballing. I'm not like going through any scientific method or whatnot. I'm not worth the effort. And of course, I'll take all the, the roof supports there and just start cutting angles and gluing together. Some require a little additional trimming, no big deal. It's balsa wood, so it's really soft, no big deal. And glue them together. Of course, I want to put a little bead on here for the turn handle for the spindle, and just a quick little bead. I got a thing of beads I got from the Dollar Tree. Glue it on, and boom. Of course, the balsa wood, it looks a little too pretty. So I'm going to use a wire brush here and just actually start running it through and then just get some texture into this. Would it have been a good idea to do this before putting anything together? Yes. But hey, I wasn't planning ahead, and I rarely do, so now I just got to deal with it. Of course, now I want to actually start putting the roof supports on here, and it might require a little bit of extra trimming, but it's just a matter of grabbing one, doing a little additional trimming if needed, and then just super gluing it in place. Quick, easy. Of course, I want to actually cut up some more support beams going from one side to the other for, when eventually I do want to put some tiles on this. So it's just a matter of, taking some thinner pieces of balsa wood that I have and just kind of lining it up and then just cutting the beams, some super glue, and then gluing them into place. Put on as many as I think I'm going to need for what just for the look I want to go. Not that anyone's ever going to look underneath, but I put on what I need. Of course, I want to have some feet because I don't want to do like the whole post in the ground thing. So just put some feet on this, some quick cuts, short pieces from some offcuts that I have, and super glue them in place. Remember those thin sheets I cut from the little offcuts? Well, here I'm using them. I'm going to texture them up, give them a wood grain pattern with a plastic brush. Then I'm going to kind of like individual planks. Now I realize it looks like, oh, this isn't going to work. You're never going to see them once you put the shingles on. I did it to both sides. So if you actually flip these upside down, you'll actually see the work I've done. Not that anyone should ever flip these upside down, but it's simple. Glue it on and then trim off the excess. Now, take some more of these And I'm going to texture it up again with my plastic grout brush. These I'm actually going to be hand cutting up into shingles eventually. And I want to get the wood grain texture in. You know, nice little pattern there. Yeah, it looks kind of blah right now, but when you cut them up into individual shingles, it'll look better. Also, what I want to try and do is just make the ends a little bit rougher, so I'm going to use my pencil here and just kind of gank it up a little bit. Cut it in half, get an idea of how wide I want the shingles to be, and just start cutting away. Not really measuring because these aren't supposed to be perfect individual shingles. Boom, I have my shingles. Now, the handle for the spindle, it doesn't stick straight out. So I just want to take a pair of pliers here and then bend it into shape and then trim off the excess to what, I think it would work. And boom, I have the handle for turning the spindle to get the bucket up and down in the water. Okay, now that I got that done, I want to actually start gluing these shingles on. Now, since the foam that I'm actually gluing onto is relatively thin, I'm going to skip the whole hot glue thing because it might melt through and the shingles are kind of thin. So again, I'm just going to glue on row after row, glue on, and then slap on some shingles. PVA will take a little bit of time to dry. I could continue going on, but I just want to give it a little time to dry before I actually put the next row on. And I'll move on to now that some time has passed. Just basically do the same thing with the first row. But when you're placing the shingles, make sure to offset them. And, so you don't have that single line in between the shingles there going. And just boom, shingle, 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 shingle. And you'll actually wind up with a nice kind of cool looking shingled roof. I mean, it works, so I'm gonna go with it. Now, the one that is supposed to be like old and ancient and abandoned, I just want to mess it up some. So I'm gonna cut holes in the roof and just kind of like this thing has not been looked at in years and it's just been left to start falling apart. So, like I said, just cut some holes out and just beat the ever-loving snot out of it. And I'm also going to do that with the timber framing for it. Just carve some holes into it, cut some chunks off. Like I said, just beat the ever-loving heck out of it to make it look like no one's taken care of this in a long, 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 long time. And add a little more texture here. And, like I said, age it up. Just age it up. See? I'm using a sculpting tool, carving some deep lines like, bugs have gotten into it, or it's just starting to rot. And I want this old one to look exactly like that. Old. Like me. Of course, now that I got all the main shingles on, I need to put some cap shingles on. I'm using the same exact shingles, except I'm just bending them in half, putting some glue down, and then just put them in place. Kind of put them a little closer together than what I did with the other ones to almost give the illusion of a solid piece, but, we know it's not. But, boom. And then I'll trim out. Peanut butter time! Yes. Just putting texture paste on the base here. And it's my smoother mix of texture paste, so it's creamy peanut butter. Yes, Rick, I got that. I'm stealing that from you. But just basically paint it on, get a little wet to smooth it out some. And, boom, quick, easy, done. Of course, now that the texture paste is all dry, I kind of want to beat up some of these wells. Needs a little bit extra attention and just use some foil ball. And I have these little texture roller things that I got from Temu that I'm going to use to add some texture. And it's like, the older it is, the more I'm going to beat it up and make it look like crud. The younger the wellhead is, the less texturing it's going to get, just to make it. And of course, we all know what this is: Mod Podge and black paint. Yeah, granted, I didn't put a whole lot of black paint in my Mod Podge, just so it's kind of gray. But anything that's XPS foam is going to get a coat of this stuff, including the shingles on the roof part. This will just give it, seal it in, get a dark color, and then it gives it a nice little protective coating because the foam is weak. It needs it. Now that I got that all done, it's time we want to black bomb the whole thing. So just getting my airbrush in. You can use a rattle can for this. The Mod Podge should protect the foam. And I'm just black bombing the whole thing with my airbrush. Quick, easy. But again, you can use a brush or you can use a rattle can. I'd be careful. The Mod Podge should protect it, but I'd still, be a little bit cautious if you're using a rattle can because there is the outside chance it could warp or melt the foam. But again, I get this all black. All right, let's start adding some color to this. Now all the timber work, I'm going to basically go with my standard for timber work, any kind of timber. Colors of dark brown. Just basically try and get, roughly 100% coverage, as close as I can anyway. Quick, I mean, this is cheap craft paint, so it's not like it's going to, break the bank. And of course, again, a mid-tone brown. If you want to see the actual color, just pause it. But just give it a heavy overbrush, leave it, leaving the darkest, deepest recesses and details alone. This may be like 70 to 85% coverage, so you definitely want to leave like the shadows and dark corners alone with this step. But again, this is just an overbrush, which is basically kind of like a dry brush, but the brush is still relatively wet. Now that I got that done, I want to give it all the timber areas a quick heavy dry brush with I'm doing a light dry brush. But I'm used with a light brown. I think it's light mocha. But again, this gives it that wood, makes it actually look like wood. At least in my mind it does. Now, for the shingles and the underlying, roof part, I'm actually using my, dark, medium, light brown colors, but to differentiate it from the support timbers, I'm adding gray paint. So, it'll give it's the same basic feel, but it'll also make it distinctly different. Of course, now I'm actually going to go with my mid-tone. It's a medium brown and medium gray mix, the same as I did with the base coat, and giving it 75-85% coverage. But another trick I'm actually using for each older one is just mixing a little more gray paint, and it gives it a little bit of an aged look. And of course, here I'm using a light brown and a light gray just to give it a heavy dry brush and make all the details and textures that I made of the shingles really pop, really make them look like something. I'm even going to do this on the bottom part just for my own sake, because again, like I said, this is not really going to get flipped over and looked at. But I'm doing it because I know it's there. Of course, now I'm going to be using my dark blue-gray for the base coat on all the stones. I like the blue-gray because it just gives it a more organic feel to it. But that's just how it's my personal taste. So a dark gray on all the stone areas, and this is just a base coat, so I'm getting as close to 100% as possible. Of course, you all seen it. It's clown puke. I just to give a little slight variation in colors, I like to take different colors and just streak it through the stone, just for a little bit of visual pop. Once it gets close to the end, you're not really going to be able to see it, but it'll be just there, and like I said, just a visual pop. Of course, now I'm actually going to use the medium gray, and give it a heavy dry or overbrush. And as you can see, it is covering up a lot of that clown puke and dulling it down and making it a much more subtle tone. And that's what I'm going for. I'm not going for bright garish. I'm going for a subtle difference in colors. And of course, now I'm using a light gray, and I'm going to give all the stone areas a heavy dry brush. I'm doing the same to all the different wells. Just, you don't need to see me do 4 different, the same step on 4 different spots. So it's just different strengths. And as you can see, it is actually toning down the clown puke even more, but you still can see it. And it's only subtle, Very subtle, but I really like how it looks. So that's what I'm going to do. Of course, now I have to do all the dirt areas, or, where I put all that texture paste. I'm just going to use a dark brown and give it 100% coverage as much as I can. It's the same colors that I used on all the timber framing, but once all the flocking and stuff down, it's not going to be noticeable. So that's what I'm going to use. Of course, for this stuff, I'm going to be using a medium brown, more specifically a nutmeg brown, and just all the dirt areas, I'm going to give an overbrush. It's going to be roughly 75 to 85% coverage, like I try to do with this step on any color or area, leaving the darkest, deepest recesses alone. And of course, for the third step for the dirt areas, I'm going to be giving it a heavy dry brush with a light brown, or I think this is a light mocha. I said just a quick, heavy dry brush, not very. I'm not trying to cover everything. Just quick, make it look pretty, make all the details pop. Of course, now that all the dry brushing is done, I actually want to go ahead and hit all the stone area, and the dirt with a dark brown wash. It's a homemade job, just to give it a dingy look. Now, for as far as the caps go, I only wanted to apply the wash to the shingles themselves and not the timber framing. Again, give it a more distinct look from the shingles to the timber work. The handles, I don't want them to be like gray or whatever, so I use this like dark sequin black, and it gives it a wrought iron look. And there's little beads at the side there. I figured, let's go with a copper look. That looks good, yeah. Copper. This is just what color I think will look good here. Yeah. That's the color I'll pick. Now that the wash is dry, I want to bring all those details back out. So I'm going to go with my light brown, light gray mixture and just give it a real quick light dry brush so I can make all the high details and everything just pop and look really nice. And I'm going to do the same again with the stone. Light gray, dry brush it real light. Like I said, this is just to make all the details and all the texturing and all the little cracks and whatnot that we put into it. I want to make them pop and look really cool. That'll look cool on the table, so it will be pretty. And of course, with the dirt, I have to do the same thing as I've done with the other areas that I've put the wash on. Just a real quick light gray, light brown, and do a quick dry brush just to make all the details pop. Though most of this will be covered up at the end. Alrighty. Now that all the painting of the cap and the wellheads is done, I actually just want to glue these things to the bases. And okay, done. Of course, you've seen me do this before on other builds, but if it's just a matter of watered down PVA, and I like to sprinkle the different colors down. Go with a earth, a burnt grass, and now I'm using green grass, and then I use a yellow flock for a highlight. Now the rope. Now a lot of people I've seen use just like string or other different things like that. I like to use a twisted wire rope because when I put it in place, it's not going to move. As a matter of fact, I don't even glue this down because I'm not as far as going around the spindle. I can just wrap it around. Yeah, it's a little bit annoying wrapping it around, but I prefer this method. You want to use string, use string. If it's your will, do it how you want. I just prefer twisted wire rope, and that's what I'm going to use. Of course, the twisted wire has already been primered, so now I actually have to paint it so it looks like rope. It's relatively easy. It's just get the paint on the brush a little bit and dry brush it, and that's it. I mean, it's a simple, easy, quick, hey, this looks like rope from 3 feet away. Yeah. But again, quick, simple, easy, done. No need to overcomplicate this. Enjoy it. Have fun. Of course, you've all seen me use huge miniature tufts. It's my go-to. Do I have other brands? Yes. Matter of fact, you can see another brand sitting there off to the left on the screen, and I use those too. Just use miniatures as my go-to. Use whatever colors you want, and I just want to put them all over the place, or at least to the point where I think, okay, that's enough. Don't put any more on, or it'll be too much. Of course, they're whales. I gotta put water in. My go-to for small little areas like this, use a 5-minute epoxy, mix in some isopropyl alcohol, like a 50-50 mix. Then I'm using a single drop of dark brown ink and a single drop of green ink just to give it a little look and pour it in. Swirl it around, let it dry, done. I'm really happy with how these turned out, showing the different stages of a well's lifetime being constructed as it's being, what it's being used after it's been around for a while. And then, of course, the point for where it's like, ooh, man, nobody's come to this thing in a long time. But again, I'm really happy with how these turned out.
Hey everybody, if you watch this far, it means you watched the end, and as always, thank you very much. And it was a little bit long, so even more thank you again. These were fun to build, and I know the well thing is like, hey, everybody's built this, but so I figured I still wanted to build one, and I thought I'd do a little twist of the same well through different periods of its existence. So here's a little surprise for you though. If you actually want to get a hold of the very wells that you just saw being built, you can get them if you go to Clericon. Clericon is a BECMI convention run by the Dungeon Minister himself. It happens in October, and this is its 4th year running it, and I try and help out, with prize support and whatnot, because I can't personally attend, but, I like to help. So these wells, plus several of my other builds, will be going up to the Dungeon Minister, and he will either give away as prizes, auction items, whatever he deems fit for them. But these wells are going to Clericon. So if you actually want to get a hold of, or some of my other bills like the Basalt Tower, you're gonna have to go. Link down in the description. So again, guys, just remember, as always, whether you're building mountains or little tiny wells, the only person you got to worry about is you, because it's your terrain. Or if you go to Clericon, this could be your terrain too.